In chapter 11 and 12, it's been a while, but just refreshing your memories, what really happened was Jesus finally entered into Jerusalem, and he entered into the temple, and he had a clash against religious leaders, but they're not really happy because Jesus is accusing them for their corruption. Jesus is accusing them for their spiritual. They're not healthy. So they were not really happy about Jesus having those troubles in that area. Who were the religious leaders? Pharisees, Sadducees, teachers of law, and they try to trap Jesus with these sneaky questions. But Jesus answered every single questions with these brilliant answers. With such an authority, Jesus just nailing them down. And Jesus once again exposing them, their corruption, how bad they were, how spiritually bad they were in public. And after that's done, Jesus walked out of temple, and that's what happened. And then, after winning this battle against the religious leaders, the chapter 13 starts. New begins. As Jesus was leaving this temple, and one of the disciples said to Jesus, "Look, teacher, what massive stones, what magnificent building." And we don't know who was the disciple saying this. But he talks about this building, great building. What is it? The building that's on the mountain, the Jerusalem, the temple. He was looking at the temple, and he was just amazed by the magnificent and beauty of this building. And look, this is great. This is wonderful. This is so great. Check this out. That's what the disciples try to do. But let's look at the picture of that temple. It's called Herod's Temple on the Temple Mount. It is another picture. This is a miniature building that they had, and this is a picture of it, and you have an idea how they look like. This temple was built by Herod the Great, and that's why they call it the Temple of Herod. And this building they began building this temple in 19 BC, and they took about 49 years to complete building this temple. And they built it with using marble, gold as decorative materials. The outer court measured about 500 by 300 yards. Okay. It was bordered by walls of massive white stones, some of which were 16 feet long and 3 to 4 feet high. And this is pretty massive, pretty big. Let's look at the picture of this guy. He's standing by this big stone. And we don't know how they did it, but they just somehow worked through it, and they just worked it. Even right now, like building a house like that, building like this, you probably need a lot of heavy-duty equipment. But in the ancient time, they built it with their hands, and this is just amazing. But anyways, just looking at them, it's a beautiful, it's wonderfully made building. And we also know how much the Jewish people in general, they love temples. They love the house of God. The Jewish people, they have this special affection for this temple of God. Jewish community, the temple, it revolved around their life. The temple is the center of their life. So going all the way back to Moses' time, they used to have this mobile temple called tabernacle, right? Tabernacle. It's like tent, but it's a big tent. It's a tabernacle, and it was the center of their community. Okay, wherever they go, they brought this tent with them, this tabernacle with them. In 40 years, they wandered in this desert, and wherever they go, they had this tabernacle is placing in the center of their camp. So physically, the temple the tabernacle was the center of the community. Because they worship God. Because they honor God, and that's a place where they meet God, they worship God, their sins are forgiven. It's a very special place for them. After the Moses time, after Moses, Moses couldn't enter into the land of Canaan, but people did, the second generation. They entered into Canaan. And they built the very first temple. And you know the name of it? And you know who built it? Oh, Andrew's not here anymore. Come on. Oh. Okay, Solomon's temple. David prepared everything, the resources, and Solomon eventually finished building. It took about 7 years to build this beautiful, wonderful temple. It's about 827 BC. Let me see, there's another picture, I think. This is tabernacle. It's right in the middle of the center of the camp. Okay? The next, this is the temple of Solomon. And this temple, the very first actual temple, it's not mobile, it's not a tent, it's actual building. It was built, but unfortunately it was destroyed by Babylonian Empire. They came and they attacked. They destroyed the whole temple. Not only the temple, they destroyed the whole Israel, like Judah and the north of Israel, right? So they became what? Slaves, captivity in Babylon. So they had to move out of Jerusalem and live in Babylonian as a slaves for a while. And later on they came back to Jerusalem, and the very first thing they did, as soon as they came back from Babylonian captivity, they start to rebuild the temple. And it's called, anybody know the name of it? Zerubbabel. This is the second temple. Yeah. Zerubbabel. It sounds a little weird, but Haggai, the prophet Haggai, and those people, Ezra, they work together and they try to rebuild this temple of God. See? And they really value this temple. They love this temple. They have a special affection because this is their identity. This is their treasure. So they have a great affection on temple itself. And then later on, this is a third temple. And King Herod the Great, and he started to build it. And you know why he built it? And he's not even Jewish. Why he builds it? And let's look at this is as well, but it's just a little smaller. I think this is the smallest out of 3. And the next one, and if you look at the Herod's temple, it's a lot bigger than the Temple of Solomon. It's a lot bigger, it's more magnificent comparing with the Temple of Solomon, Solomon's temple. See? And why he built it? Anybody know? He's a very political guy. He was the king in that region, and he is still under that colonization of Roman Empire, and he is, taking care of managing those Jewish community, and the reason he built a temple in Jerusalem, expanding in such a large scale, is he knew how much the Jewish people love the temple, so he wanted to get the popularity. He wanted to control over Israel, the Jewish people. So he spent a lot of resources, a lot of time rebuilding, taking about 49 years rebuilding this temple of Herod. Well, after that, and Jesus, that's the time of Jesus, and Jesus seeing this. The disciples seeing this beautiful, magnificent building, the Herod restored, expanded. And the disciple thinking, looking at this beautiful building and thinking that Jesus would have loved that as well. Telling him, look, this is beautiful stone, beautiful building. It's a massive stone. How awesome it is. And saying this. And the response from Jesus is this, the second verse. Do you see all these great buildings? Do you see all these great buildings? Replied Jesus. Not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Basically meaning that he will be destroyed again. It'll be gone. The disciple, he was overwhelmed by this beauty and majestic look of this building, temple. But Jesus was not impressed at all. And he's saying, it will be gone. It will be destroyed. Why is that? Number one, he's saying that because he's not impressed with those kind of things. Because he's God. He's Son of God. He belongs to heaven. He's from, he came from heaven to earth. He belongs to heaven. He stepped out of this eternity, this heavenly realm. I mean, compared to heaven, the temple in heaven, this is nothing. This is like not even a dirt compared to it. He's not impressed at all. It doesn't matter how beautiful they are, how magnificent they are in our eyes. To Jesus, this is nothing. So he was not impressed at all. So again, we need to know we can impress Jesus with this material things that we have. The man-made stuff, we cannot impress Jesus at all. Okay? So Jesus, the second reason. Jesus knows exactly why he came down. The purpose he had, the reason that he came down on the earth was to save us. His purpose was not to build a temple or church. Right? The physical building, that was not his purpose. If that was his purpose, he would start building stuff. But he never done anything like that. So he was not really interested in these buildings, architectures at all. See, building is just building. You got this? Building is just building. See, God is spirit. He is spirit. It doesn't matter where we worship. As long as we have a heart of worship, as long as we have this attitude of worship, it doesn't really matter where you are worshiping God. John chapter 4, verse 24, it says this. God is spirit, and his worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. See? God is in spirit. His worshipers must worship in the spirit and in truth. And that's all it matters. That's all he requires for us. As worshipers, that's all we need to have. The worship, spirit, and in truth. It doesn't really matter where we are worshiping God, what kind of building we have. It's nothing matters. You know those people who went to other places, Central Asia or Dominican Republic or Haiti, and some of you guys probably know, have seen those houses or churches they have. Let's look at it. There's a picture. This is the house. This is a church. We visited. It's if you go there, there's nothing there. There's nothing there. Literally nothing. There's one light bulb, one single light bulb, and most of the time it doesn't even work, right? One time we were like worshiping with candles. It was like pitch black, and it was out, and we had to lit up the candle, and we worship God in that. But even though it's like really small, we have another picture. This is small. I think that building is a little bit, it's almost like this size. This size. The entire that church they have. It's not really big, it's not really super, but it's amazing how they worship God. It's amazing whenever I go to worship, whenever I worship with those Haitian brothers and sisters, it is just amazing, just like challenging me so much. The way that their sincere heart and their desire and the way they worship is just like so beautiful. And we always come up with the idea, hey, this is worship. It's nothing about the big church, big facility, and with a big instrument and big praise band. Even though they worship without anything, all they have is their vocals, right? And a little bit of like clapping. And that's all they have. But the way they worship is just like challenging us and inspiring us and motivate us and just like realizing, and that is worship. And we always say that to ourselves. See, we don't need a lot. We don't need a lot to worship God. All we need is this heart of it. I think that's the very first thing that we need to have. And then, that's what we hear from this verse. That we can learn from this. And Jesus foretells that this beautiful temple, this magnificent temple of Herod, will be destroyed. And then foretells it. It's a prophecy. And historically, it's proven. AD 70, it was destroyed by Roman general named Titus. If you take the old ancient civilization or history class, you probably know him. Okay, Titus. He destroyed this whole Jerusalem area. He kicked them out, and we wonder why, right? Because we are familiar with the Romans, who are so friendly to Jewish people especially, right? They allow people to have their own community. They allow people to have their own government. That's why they had that religious leaders and political leaders, right? And then they allow them to have their own church and synagogue. And they were so generous to them. But all of a sudden, AD 70, they turn around and they're seizing them. And why? Because we know in the history, there's a lot of attempt. The Israelites, they're like Koreans. They are really, they want to have independent, and they've been kept on revolting against the Roman Empire, and they're fed up with it and decide to kick them out. And this is it. And that they demolish, they destroy the whole area and kicking them out. And after that, we call diaspora. Jewish diaspora happens. Every Jewish people, they scattered around the whole world. That's like 2,000 years ago. Let's look at the picture of that demolished, destroyed temple. See, the temple was destroyed. Just like Jesus said, it's destroyed. It's gone. You see, disciples loved, and Jewish people loved this temple, this building, the house of God. Well, there are a lot of reasons, but they loved it because, for this disciple, they loved it because it was beautiful outside. It's magnificent. They were attracted by this physical outer exterior appearance of this building. And if you think about it, we are like this sometimes, don't we? We are attracted to a bigger and better, beautiful stuff. When it comes to church, we have this great admiration for bigger and better church. We make this assumption: the bigger church, they are doing something very right. God bless them because they are good. We're making that assumption, and we are trying to learn from them. Learn from those big church pastors, and we try to be a fan or disciple of the church. The bottom line is that we want to be like them. Successful ministry equals mega church, bigger ministry. That's what we are thinking. And we look at the smaller church, and we have this pity, at the same time very negative assumption, thinking that they're doing something not right. They must do something better. They need to pray more or read Bible or something. That's why they are staying small. We're making that kind of assumption towards smaller churches. If you think about it, what is revival? What is the good church? What is your definition of a good church? Having bigger building, is it revival? Is it good church? Having many members, is it considered as a good church? Revival? Collecting a lot of money, offering, they are considered as a sign of a revival or a sign of good church, healthy church. Well, could it be in a way? But not necessarily. We can't really judge the authenticity of a revival based on their physical or material appearance they have. Number or size, it's not really matter. It shouldn't be the standard of revival or standard of the good church. Before we ask all those outer questions, we should ask this. Going back to John, how much desire we have worship? How much do we really love God? Am I really willing to listen from God, His voice? Am I really willing to follow His will and His instruction? Even though I sacrifice, even though I lose something that is very important, am I willing to sacrifice myself and follow His will? And this is a question that we're supposed to ask as a people of God, as a disciple of Christ. If we really have faith in Christ, if we really have the Christ living in our heart, just like I said before, it doesn't really matter where you are. It doesn't really matter where you are. See, because Jesus Christ, He did everything for us. We are no longer living in this Old Testament laws anymore. We talked about it in Galatians. We're free in Christ. We don't have to go all the way to Israel, climbing up to the Jerusalem and worship there. We don't have to do that anymore because of Jesus. He has done everything right. And He is enough. Just by accepting Him in your heart and just like following Him and it's just like, trusting that Jesus Christ is living in your life, and that's enough. That's enough. No more. Nothing at all. You know why Jesus destroyed this temple? He looks like he murdered this temple. This beautiful, wonderful temple that the disciple loved so much. Why was that? I was thinking of it. Like, why? Why He just demolished this beautiful, beautiful building they loved so much. Such a severe way. It's like completely gone. It's no use. It's not useful anymore. See, Old Testament time, they need to have a temple. They need to have a tabernacle. It's access to God. Through that, they are forgiven. So it was central part of their life. But as Jesus Christ comes in, they don't need that. So they still have this temple of God, this building as their pride, as their confidence. They valued it too much. They become their own idols. And as they're marveling at this beautiful temple, listen to this. As they are looking at this beautiful temple on the mountain, they were worshiping it. And the glory of God is starting to diminish. And that's something that Jesus is pointing out. This temple must be gone. Needs to be destroyed and rebuild temple of Christ. See, the disciple saw the beauty of temple, but isn't it ironic that he was looking at Jesus Christ at the same time? He didn't see the Jesus Christ, how beautiful He was, and who He was. Jesus Christ is much more greater than temple. Jesus Christ is much more, larger than anything in this whole world. But disciple, seeing that temple, he didn't see who Christ really was. Let me ask you, when do you come to church? When do you worship God? What are you looking for? What are your single most important thing that you have? And some people, the size of church is their priority. Or some people, children's ministry or youth group program is really important. For some people, praise band. A lot of people loves praise, right? They love to sing and love to listen to beautiful song, music, and it could be a huge factor for them. Or sermons, pastors. It's great, it's wonderful, but we have to be really careful and we have to be aware. And sometimes we put those things above God, and because we are paying too much attention to those things, we lose the focus to Christ, and we start to losing Jesus Christ and His importance. Oh, praise was so great, so awesome. The guy who was playing guitar, he's so cute, so handsome. He has this style, like hairstyle, is like just like cutting edge, like most modern, lovely, awesome. His voice is so great. I'm not talking about you, I'm talking about him, okay? If we start to say that, if we start to think that, I mean, it's great, but sometimes we caught up with it. The praise goes bigger than God. Sometimes we say, oh, this pastor, he has this most beautiful, articulate, awesome message, and I'm so inspired by hearing all those things. Wonderfully organized, sophisticated. I learned so much. I would like to hear that sometimes, but you know what? If that becomes bigger than Christ, that needs to be demolished. If Christ really living in us, and if He is really living in us, and if we really believe that He is living in us, we realize how beautiful He is. And we cannot compare with anything else. Even though we see those beautiful buildings, beautiful programs, and beautiful speech, and beautiful praise, everything becomes secondary thing and overshadowed by the glory and beauty of Christ. And that's faith, guys. Brothers and sisters, we want to worship Christ. As you guys are leaving this site, I really want you to focus on. I really want you to have this residue or remainder of, Christ Jesus. Yes, we came and we worshiped Christ, and that is the most important thing that I did. I hope and pray we can say that. It's not about the praise, it's not about the song, it's not about fellowship, but those are important, right? It's great, but the single most important thing, yes, I worshiped Christ. I saw the beauty of Christ. I saw the glory of Christ, and I hope and pray that that will be your blessing.